Today's session is one in a series of web-based Sales Management Association presentations that feature practitioners and thought leaders in the field of Salesforce effectiveness. The Sales Management Association is a professional association. We serve the sales leadership, sales operations, and sales enablement professions. We encourage you, if you're new to the Sales Management Association, to consider membership in our organization. You can learn more about membership and also about the many benefits of joining Sales Management Association at our website at salesmanagement.org. I'm Bob Kelly, Sales Management Association Chairman. Today it's my pleasure to introduce an excellent speaker who is no stranger to our audience. I'd like to do that now. Linda Maxwell from Business Efficacy. Linda Maxwell is CEO and co-founder of Business Efficacy, a consulting practice specializing in sales manager enablement in business-to-business sales organizations of all sizes. For the past 20 years, Linda has led the design and delivery of Business Efficacy's sales management tools, processes, and development services. Thank you very much to Linda Maxwell for being with us today. I'll welcome you, Linda. Always great to have you.
Thank you.
Terrific. And I'll let you take it away. Looking forward to a great presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bob. Excited to be here talking to you about resilience. And as we look at the topic for today with resilience, I know all of us have our individual stories. The past 15 months have definitely created plenty of opportunities for all of us to have to tap into our own resilience in sales organizations as we try to move forward in these, however you want to describe these times. I do have a story, as all of you do. Business Efficacy had to completely, in essence, kind of flip what we do and how we do it. We do sales management coaching, typically in person, so we can do observations. We do sales management development sessions, typically in person. We do jumpstart sales transformation, typically in person. So all of that had to be flipped to video, virtual kinds of experiences. Yes, it was a heavy lift. Yes, it took resilience, but I know all of you have your stories as well. So the question that many of you might be asking yourself is, well, Linda, aren't we past that? Do we really need to be resilient moving forward? And that's where I would like to challenge your thinking right out of the gate, is we believe that resilience is that differentiator moving forward. So two big reasons I want to talk to you today about this and have you consider what you might want to do relative to resilience. The first one is, as we did our study in the last 15 months around the difference between organizations that were successful in the midst of all that we went through, resilience was at the core. When we look at the future, we don't think change is going to stop. So resilience is going to become, again, the secret to how organizations move forward. So with those two reasons, and oh, by the way, it's never too late to start being resilient, or your sales organizations being resilient, we want to pose some ideas to you. So when we look at the evidence around resilience, in 2020, all of us would probably admit there were winners, losers, and basically survivors. As we, Business Efficacy, looked at those organizations, be they customers, be they other organizations, other ways in which we were able to gather information, when we stepped back, we saw resilience was at the core for the winners. When we looked at 2021, and all of us, I would say most of us at least, when January 1st came around, we were hoping, hope is not a strategy, that we were through all the craziness, and we found out that we weren't. So as we look at today, literally June, early June, what we're seeing as we look back on the last 5 months, again, what we're seeing is those that are being really successful have resilience at the core. So we keep getting data, facts that are saying resilience is what is differentiating those organizations who are successfully dealing with a tremendous amount of regular change. And now that the masks are off, as they would say, change is in some respects almost happening faster on a daily basis, because so many people have different interpretations of what to do, how to do it, when to do it. So resilience around how to move forward successfully, again, is another key. So what we're going to spend our time looking at is, in today's reality, and I'm talking early June 2021, how might resilience, which is obviously the people on the right-hand side of the screen, really make a difference and be the secret to being successful, and non-resilience, which is obviously the left-hand side, be what slows us down. So we're going to take the time today to explore what is resilience for ourselves, and as leaders of sales organizations, what we can do to help our teams, our sales forces, become resilient in dealing with today's change. The things I'm going to be sharing with you today are targeted at being something that you can do today, something that is within your control, and something that will make a competitive difference. So my goal is to really give you some pragmatic things that you can tactically move forward that begins taking you and your sales organization on a path to even stronger resilience than they maybe have to today. So what are we going to look at? I'm going to start first of all with what we're talking about as to why resilience is about sales performance. Everything in sales organizations many times needs to be about how do we perform, be it delivering of the customer experience, winning new business, retaining customers, whatever it is. We're going to talk about resilience as it relates to sales performance. Last year, as some of the people were talking to me in the last few months about 2020, they were saying, 2020 in some respects was about take care of your employees, take care of your customers. However, 2021, all of a sudden, we do need to be moving forward more aggressively, more productively around performance. So what I'm going to talk to you today is a soft topic, but it's not meant to have a soft outcome. It is meant to have a very pragmatic bottom line impact. So let's look at what those three factors are that we believe resilience helps you get relative to sales performance. The first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at mindset. Mindset absolutely does matter relative to resilience. So mindset being our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, and what can a resilient mindset do to sales performance. Number two, we're going to look at pivot. Pivot, what we're going to mean here is leveraging your strengths. So in other words, there are things that you and your sales organizations have been doing that are strengths. And how do we pivot the way in which we do those things so that we are more successful in changing times than we maybe would be if we wouldn't make the pivot. So how do we leverage pivots? And then the third thing that we're going to look at as a part of resilience is the discipline. Yeah, the discipline is the practices, the routines, how we stay with the pivot. In other words, what we need to slightly change, and the resilience mindset. So those are the three things that we're going to look at today and see what insight it gives us into what we might need to do to create a resilient sales force or even resilience within ourselves. We're going to kind of look at both of those pieces. Where did the information that I'm going to be sharing with you come from? Didn't come from a book. It really has come from the last 15 months of studying what are sales organizations doing that's working, and what are we seeing that they do that doesn't work. I, my partner, and a lot of my colleagues have had an opportunity in the last 15 months to work with hundreds of sales managers and sales executives, and to be able to step back and really see, so what is it when it comes to resilience and that difference? What is it that they're doing? So that's where we're going to go. And in many cases, we've created more case studies. Interesting, challenging times usually brings out interesting case studies. So we will again be sharing with you lots of examples of things that we see live, customers, prospects, other companies doing that's working, that falls in the resilient category. And what are we seeing not working? I was struggling, I and my colleagues were struggling trying to figure out what's a word that's opposite of resilient. And the most positive one we could come up with was despondent. So we're going to be looking at resilient and non-resilient, which for today's purposes, we're going to call it despondent. So what do we know? We know that when you do these three things, this is resilience. So resilience is more than just mindset, more than just the ability to kind of pivot, and more than just hang in there and lean in hard. It's when you combine those three things together that you have a resilience sales organization that gives you sales performance. So let's start pausing before I kind of jump into it. Let's start with a pause. And I want you to pause for a moment and think about yourself and your sales organization, either one. And I want you to think about where might you be on that scale. And here's what I mean with the question that you see there. Many of us would score ourselves one way in 2020. So I want you to think about, if you're going to choose to score yourself or your sales organization, choose one of the two. How would you score yourself in 2020? on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'm going to ask you to seriously think about it. If you want to write it down, go ahead and do that, so that you kind of benchmark where were you in 2020. A lot of people really leaned in hard on 2020 and would score themselves pretty high. Okay. Now, once you've kind of come up with that number, scale of 1 to 10, I want you to think about, what about today? What about today relative to resilience? And again, if you chose yourself to score 2020, do that right now. Or if you chose your sales organization, score 2021 in the sales organization. So I'm going to pause, and this is a great time if you've got some questions around what I've shared so far to kind of send them in via chat, and Bob will pass them out to me. So why am I asking you to do this? Because what we're finding as we continue to work with organizations in 2021 is resilience is even making a bigger impact today than it did in 2020. And many organizations that we're talking to found that their resilience score has gone down in 2021, and it needs to be strengthened. So your self-reflection, maybe that's the case that you find yourself. Bottom line is, the goal is the stronger we can be with our resilience, the better chance we have to embrace change, take advantage of it, and be successful with our sales performance. Okay, so let's look at mindset. Yes, mindset absolutely does matter. It is a huge factor in resilience. So again, just to kind of remind everybody, mindset is beliefs, thoughts, attitudes that we have that in essence create our feelings and emotions and become reality. And what's interesting relative to the whole mindset right now is many people are unconscious around what their thoughts, their beliefs, and what's going on in their mind. So when all this change hits, which is going on right now, obviously customer expectations are in motion, competition is in motion, our colleagues are in motion, even though masks are off, it's almost more confusing. And with all that change going on, and potentially without a resilient mindset, this is how many people end up feeling. So this emotional heavy load that people are feeling without having a resilient mindset is what we're going to look at, because resilient mindset is how we combat the things that you see here that are obviously happening because of all the change that people are experiencing. So I'm going to get a little bit theoretical with you for just a couple of minutes relative to mindset. So first of all, as you see, one of my favorite writers, speakers, John Maxwell, no relation, I think he says it really well. You are not what you think you are, but you are what you think you are. So I love that saying, because it basically says that which we think is how we feel and how we go about behaving. So what we have to do when we think about a resilient mindset is we have to become conscious around self-talk. In other words, those conversations that we have going on in our head, we have to become conscious of what those are. And the more we choose the conscious thoughts, the more it's going to positively impact our behaviors, which obviously can drive increased sales performance. To give you a little picture of this, these are examples of ones that we heard a lot this last year. So a mindset, in other words, belief systems, thoughts, attitudes that people on the non-resilient side would have been saying are the things that you see listed there. So as you even look at them, it almost kind of like, as you read them out loud or say them in your own mind, they kind of feel heavy. And with that heaviness comes this exhaustion, which doesn't allow them to really lean in to really what needs to be done and be successful, kind of moving whatever it is that needs to be moved forward. As opposed to contrasting that with those that have chosen a resilient mindset, such as the ones that you see here. Big difference in the energy, big difference in even how they would potentially go about moving forward, simply because of the mindset and its implications to their emotions and their energy and their ability to move forward. So ideally, what we'd be looking at is how do we choose a resilient mindset? For those of you who have gone through this kind of training maybe in the past, self-talk, when you are controlling it, is an affirmation. So an affirmation is basically a choice that says, I choose to believe X. And I am feeding myself that belief over and over and over again. And really, as I would sometimes say, continuing to lean in on it, believe it, and have it become a reality. So what we're going to suggest is that the best organizations out there are choosing a resilient mindset. And by choosing a resilient mindset, what I'm meaning is they have chosen a belief that they or their people are to embrace and really live with day in and day out, that is empowering, that is energizing, and that moves them forward with strength to deal with whatever they might be dealing with them. What I'm going to use today as an example as I go through resilience is be bold. One of our clients actually chose that as their resilience mindset for 2021, and they went ahead and put it in the water bottles. They put it in what they gave their people. So it's just everywhere. Be bold is everywhere, and that is what they talk about, think about, and are constantly reinforcing. So what I'm suggesting is that choose a resilient mindset means that you literally choose a mindset that you want to be core, foundational to what gives you that strength. So let's look at what resilience could be if you chose a resilient mindset and how to really make that mindset work for you. So I'm going to go through each one of the steps of resilience. So by steps in resilience, the things I'm going to go through, and yes, I'm going to do every one of the letters to the word resilience. These are tactics. These are independent tactics that we saw clients, sales leaders do as the means to make the resilient mindset, whatever it was they chose, work, stick, and give energy. So first one here is resolve to take it on. What that is saying on a daily basis to choose the mindset that you want to embrace and that you want to keep kind of in the forefront of your mind so that it's empowering you to do whatever needs to be done. So choose to do the mindset on a daily basis. Choose, in my client's case, to be bold. Number two, another tactic, encourage yourself daily. What encourage yourself daily is really alluding to is we have to be our own cheerleaders. We need to be the ones giving ourselves positive feedback, encouragement, proof points. We can't, nor can our sales organizations depend on others to provide that for them. So we as individuals, we as sales leaders need to do this for ourselves and for our people. Make sure that there is this positive feedback loop that's constantly going and encouragement constantly going. Thinking about that cheerleader relative to whatever the resilience mindset is. Number three, step up today. A lot of humans, of which we all are, is tomorrow becomes one of our favorite strategies. We will get to it tomorrow, and then tomorrow it never comes. So with a resilience mindset, it is literally about stepping up to it today, not waiting to start being the resilient mindset, whatever it is tomorrow, movement today. So never a better time than to begin than literally today. So that's another tactic. Another tactic in resilience is imperfections are opportunities. Many of us sometimes unconsciously choose to believe that we can be perfect. That's not a good way to go because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have mishaps. We're going to have miscalculations. So if we begin to, with a resilient mindset, embrace those as learning opportunities and instead say, I learned, and then keep moving forward with the mindset, whatever that resilient mindset is, it becomes an empowerment as opposed to a speed bump. So don't let imperfections or mistakes, mishaps, miscalculations be speed bumps. Have them be actually energizers to kind of move us forward. The next one is listen. It says listen to enabling messages. Our society is so prone with everything from naysayers to anger, frustration, negative talk, media, it's all around us. And so part of having a resilient mindset might be choosing to not listen to all of that negativity and instead finding sources and ways to filter and make sure that you're filtering the positive that reinforces your resilient mindset. Again, whatever it might be. Be bold, for example. Ignite your mind and body. What this tactic is all about is we need energy to be able to move forward with whatever the mindset might be. And that means that we take care of ourselves. So it might be your tactic is to eat right, to exercise, to get the sleep that you maybe need. Those are things that enable our, in essence, kind of physical body to be able to live the mindset. When people are really, really tired, it becomes difficult to even take a resilient mindset and do something with it. So maybe your tactic to really live your resilient mindset is something that's actually physical or mental when it comes to sleep, as an example. Okay, the next one, experience success. Humans, again, have this tendency to look at the negative. So at the end of the day, as opposed to reflecting on all the things that we did wrong, all the things that we could have done better, are we choosing to step back and say, what are the things we did well? What were the things that were in alignment with our resilient mindset that give us energy and confidence to kind of go into the next day? Because in a changing environment, we need that on a constant basis. So how have we taken that positive things that happened and solidify them in our head so that it enables us for the next day? Never give up. This one is another tactic that we see being used out there that reinforces the how to stay resilient with your mindset. Is a lot about, we're going to trip, we're going to fall. There's never kind of a straight path to success. We know the road is kind of curvy. We know sometimes we fall off the track. The idea with never give up is that the moment we get off track, the moment we deviate, we stop, we pause, and we get back up, and we get back on that track. That's another tactic that we saw used a lot. The next one is complete a task. Intriguing. This one is basically saying at the end of each day, because again, things can be hard, and a resilient mindset requires that we are giving ourselves proof, evidence that it works. Sometimes the proof and evidence has to be as simple as actually completing a positive task on something that's important for the day, which again reinforces that whole mindset that we need to be continuing to reinforce. And last but not least, it's effort one tactic. What organizations were doing who were using this tactic around resilience for the mindset, they were basically saying, stay focused on one major thing. Don't try and do too many things, but pick the thing that really matters and put your energy, put that mindset behind that main thing. So organizations that prioritize the few things really leverage this particular resilience tactic as a means to kind of get their people the energy that they needed. So with all of these as examples, I wanted to kind of give you different ideas on how to, whatever resilient mindset you pick, you can kind of keep it going, keep it moving, keep it solidly in place. Told you I was going to give you case studies. So the examples that you see up here right now on the left-hand side in the despondent category were true examples of kind of the mindset that was permeated within some organizations, and the ones on the right in other organizations. So I don't need to spend time talking about the ones that were negative and really didn't work. It really was kind of a non-resilient mindset. In other words, non-resilient was just kind of hang tight, or there's better days ahead. That doesn't build resilience. What did build resilience, and the three that you see on the right-hand side, are actual organizations that were very successful as they move forward. And so the win the weight, in other words, we're doing things, we are winning as we do these particular tactics to kind of move ourselves forward. Be bold, obviously one of my favorites in case you haven't noticed, and embrace the opportunity. So a mindset of embrace the challenge and the change of every day and see what we can do with it. That's fun, it's exciting. The difference in the mindset, the resilience mindset on the right-hand side, was significant, both to the individual who was leading the sales organization and the sales organization itself. So what I'm going to suggest at this stage is that you choose a resilient mindset. So in other words, I'm going to pause and say the today is right now. So the question is, do you have a resilient mindset that you've chosen? And again, I'm going to keep coming back to the simplicity of this one client. Be bold. They chose that mindset, and they are working it every single day. Do you have one? So I'm going to pause for a moment and just say, pick one. Pick one. If you don't have one, I would suggest that you begin considering some, and in the end, pick one either for yourself or for your sales organization. So I'm going to move on to the third component, or the second component, I'm sorry, the second component around resilience in a sales force. Mindset, big deal, got to start there. But the second part is once you have the mindset, what are you doing? What are you applying this mindset, for example, of be bold to? And what a lot of the best organizations who really build resilience is they make sure that their people are focusing on, we call it kind of a pivot, which has become obviously a very common word out there. And by pivot, what we're meaning is it's already a strength of the organization, the sales organization, and you want to leverage that strength, but it has to be done slightly different because of the changing environment. So what we saw the best organizations who are building resiliency is they made sure that there was a pivot they were working on that enabled their people to see and experience success. And that was a really big deal during challenging times, is how do we make sure that our people can see the mindset when applied to something really matters, really works. So they chose the pivot. Let me give you some examples of common pivots. The reason I put this slide is without a focus on a common pivot, this is sometimes how sales organizations are behaving out there as they try and really make something happen, when the smart ones are really stepping back and saying, we're going to choose a pivot that we know will work, that we know will help our people be successful and reinforce the resilience mindset we have. So I'm going to give you 3 different examples that we worked with a lot of organizations on in the past 15 months. One of them related to virtual relationship selling. So we all know that sales organizations had to go to virtual relationship management. And we all know, as the visual says here, we had to do things to make sure our people knew how to use the technology, to have that video-based conversation. We knew that all our people needed to know how to have the environment right. In other words, kind of the background, the surrounding, the noise, all of those different kinds of things. We knew our people had to be ready to know how to engage in a two-way dialogue, mute, unmute, all of those kinds of things, dress correctly for impact. The one that was most intriguing was the activity interaction ready. A lot of organizations realized that there was something that they had to do slightly different relative to the interaction with the customer that would enable them to be more successful maybe than the competition. 2 examples that were very prevalent out there. One is that some of the organizations realized that you needed, if you were a salesperson, to ask almost twice as many questions to get the same amount of information that you used to get. In other words, because of the video component, instead of maybe asking 2 or 3 questions to get a certain amount of information, you maybe needed to ask twice as many as that because of the dynamics of video. So what they would do is they would pivot and basically challenge their people to be prepared to ask twice as many questions to get the same amount of information they used to. Another thing is a pivot was in presentations. If you were used to presenting and pausing at maybe the 10-minute point and engaging in dialogue, what they found is the pivot had to be you had to pause at 5 minutes and get dialogue, again, because the dynamics of the video. So those are simple examples of how organizations were pivoting what their people were doing to get a bigger impact. Simple, different, but generated more success because the competition wasn't necessarily doing it. Another very common one that was being done out there as far as a pivot is relative to adoption. Definition of adoption that I'm using here is adoption is when people have salespeople, as an example, have fully embraced and are fully doing whatever it is that is suggested within the sales methodology, the sales training, the sales tool, be it Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, or whatever it is, but they're all in. And the progression in adoption is somebody will start doing the behavior, then they got to get to doing it, the full behavior, then they've got to get doing it well, and then they have to be doing it consistently. What numerous organizations chose as their pivot is they picked something that they were choosing to become really excellent at. A common example that we heard out there is a lot of organizations are encouraging their salespeople with existing clients to be providing updates, on a regular basis that are kind of thought leadership or updates in the marketplace. Some organizations chose to really get excellent at that. So they decided that, yes, we do it, but we're going to do it more consistently. We're going to have it be more relevant to today's times. We're going to do it with maybe different people within the client base. And we're going to do it at a frequency that really differentiates us from the competition. So again, slight pivot, but it's relying on something they were already doing. Now they just took it up a notch. The third one that we saw quite a bit out there, again, slight pivot, leveraging a strength, is a lot of organizations do a lot of partnering within their organization. So it might be with pre-sale support, technical people, it might be with implementation teams, it might be with other functions, product groups for referrals. So organizations who were already doing that kind of thing in place, what they did is they said, you know what, we're going to get really strong and really proactively, instead of organically, make this even better. A lot of partnering within organizations is enhanced by people kind of bumping into each other in the offices. Well, when you can't bump into each other in the offices, what some organizations were finding is the partnering was going down. So some clients chose to make partnering a big priority, pivot. And so the pivot was proactive scheduling of update conversations that were done more frequently and done using video. So what they were able to do is they were actually able to accelerate the partnership that they had between their different groups within their organization. And sometimes they were even doing that with centers of influence. Again, productivity improvement that they proactively embraced, provided evidence that yes, our strength, when we pivot it, will generate even more sales success, which then reinforced the mindset. So examples, case studies. Some of them you can see here. The ones on the left were pivots, in other words, lack thereof. Most of the negative are what really didn't work out there is people were not choosing a pivot. Or the one in the middle that you see was really kind of fascinating is a pivot isn't start something totally new and different. And there were organizations who did try some things really new and different, and that didn't receive as much success as leveraging a strength and kind of taking it to the next stage. The last one where it says stayed in phase one, that relates to virtual video-based relationship management. Some people only got as far as getting their people to turn on the camera, and they never went much further than that. So didn't experience a lot of success. Ones on the right did definitely experience success. So an example of a pivot is we maybe targeted a little bit different prospect, but we did exactly what we normally did. We just targeted at different people, different companies. Others upgraded that experience. In other words, are there a couple of things that we can add to what we do for our customers so that the experience, again, is more differentiated from the competition? And then the last one, I just gave you that example a couple of minutes ago. All of these things were pivots around taking the mindset, applying it to something that then generated success, but then just reinforced the mindset. Okay, so I'm going to again pause. And at this pause, I'm going to say to you, do you have a pivot for yourself or for your sales organization? Pivots leverage strengths. Pivots ensure success by simply applying it a little bit differently with the right mindset. So I would encourage you, again, going back to building resilient sales forces, is you need to choose what is one thing that you could get your organization to do that's already a strength. They're just going to apply it slightly different. Okay, let's look at the last one. The last one is discipline. We know discipline is routines and practices that we do that, quite frankly, get applied against the pivot. And the pivot is providing evidence and reinforcement of the mindset, just kind of fueling that mindset, which gives us the energy to kind of move forward in this crazy world in which we find ourselves. So a couple things I'm going to point out relative to discipline. And this one really is about what sales managers need to do. The other two can be just for yourself. So in other words, you can choose for yourself as a sales leader or anybody who might be on this webinar to do the resilient mindset. You can also choose your own pivot. This one here, this discipline one, we're really talking about what do sales leaders need to do to create resilient sales organizations. So what you see here is number one, relative to discipline. If you have the resilient mindset chosen and you have the pivot chosen, in order for that mindset to be sustained, to be built, nourished, grown, it needs to be led, managed, and coached. For that pivot to be worked and really get the maximum payout, maximum impact out of it, it needs to be led, managed, and coached. So what you see on this visual right here is the three most common reasons people don't do something. So what are the three most common reasons somebody wouldn't stick with the resilience mindset that was chosen? Those three things. What would be the three reasons somebody doesn't do the pivot? Those three things. So this is a consciousness that if you choose to build a resilient sales organization and you choose a resilient mindset, you need to make sure that people stay focused on it, stay motivated to do it, and get developed with that mindset. You also then need to, whatever it is you're trying to get them to apply the mindset to, you also keep them focused, motivated, and supported to make it happen. So a resilient sales organization doesn't just happen. It really does take work on behalf of a sales leader, manager, and coach on whatever that mindset might be that you're choosing, and or whatever pivot you're trying to get them to make. And the last piece, and we all know this one, for a mindset and a pivot to become the way in which your organization operates requires that you have to stay with it. It's that 21 days. We got to just, as leaders, managers, and coaches, stay on that mindset and really make sure that they're applying it in the right scenarios so that it does have the kind of sales performance impact. So I'm going to go back to my client example here around Be Bold. If all they would have done is at their sales kickoff meeting in January is launch this and then it was never heard of again, it wouldn't have been a resilient mindset. If they would have done it and then not applied it to one or two pivots that are really making a difference, it also wouldn't have had as big an impact as it is. And if the leader, managers, and coaches wouldn't have chosen to really stay with it, knowing what it was going to take, knowing the barriers they were going to have to overcome, they also wouldn't have gotten where they needed to go. So what is all of this that I'm talking about? What I'm really suggesting in the end is leader, managers, and coaches really do make a difference. Some of the things when we think about discipline, again, case stories here. On the left-hand side, there's examples of leader, managers, and coaches who, when people weren't doing things, just kind of let it go because we all understand how challenging the current situation and current reality is. We let it go. Or the leader, managers, and coaches kept changing the direction and never really staying with anything. Or leaders, managers, and coaches said, we'll get to it tomorrow. That's not resiliency, and that's what's not working. And what is working is the things that you see on the right, where the managers around the discipline piece were very clear with what the mindset was, what the pivot was, and then they really stayed with it. They took it on. So even people who might have been challenged to implement it, they had conversations about what was it going to take and then helped them and supported them through it. So choosing resilience or resilient sales forces is a conscious choice, and that's in actuality what I'm going to ask you to think about. Yes, I'm going to ask you to think about a discipline that you might need to do, but this one actually comes last. You first have to have the mindset, you have to have the pivot, then you can think about the discipline. So the whole point of my message here today is to build a resilient sales organization, which I'm going to suggest to you is vital, given change doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. And it's quite simple, but it really is a choice. It really is a choice around what is going to be your resilient mindset for yourself or your sales organization. What are you going to apply the mindset to that really matters? In other words, maybe a pivot. And then what are you as a leader, manager, coach willing to commit to as far as keeping them focused, motivated, and supported to be able to do it? So I hope that you choose resiliency and that you choose to build a resilient sales organization, because we really do see that it matters, and I hope it matters for you as well. Thank you.